at number 10, we have Boskop Man. Boskop Man sounds like a cool dude. Boskop is the nickname you give your buddy who's always late but brings a ton of snacks for everyone. He's like a little bit of a mess but a really cool guy. You're like, hey Boskop, what's up, dude? But the Boskop Man that we're going to be talking about today was actually discovered in 1913 in Boskop, South Africa. Now there has been a little bit of controversy with this fossilized cool dude. At first, everyone was in agreement that this discovery was the remains of an ancient human species that has long since died off. But Boskop Man had a massive amount of cranial space. The skullature chamber, which held its brain, was 30% larger than our own. Even though these dudes were prehistoric, they had some big old brains. Look at the big brain on Boskop Man. But decades later, new evidence suggested that Boskop Man was actually just an ancestor of modern humans and wasn't a fallen species at all. Since then, that has been the final consensus of Boskop Man's heritage. But if we want to go down the well of crazy conspiracy theories, some people think that Boskop Man's cranial space is evidence of alien-human hybrids. Coming in at number 9, we have Neanderthals. Of all the ancestors that had a shot at being number 1 over us or even coexisting with us, Neanderthals probably had the best shot. Now, just like every other ancient civilization or species, there has been a lot of debate as to where Neanderthals stand in the genetic lineup. Some say that they were a species of their own and others say that they were a subspecies of homosapien. What can be agreed upon is that it seems that we all had the same main ancestor, which we evolved from about 800,000 years ago. There's also a lot of evidence that shows Neanderthals and humans interbred. There are some European people who have Neanderthal DNA, so in a way they live on in us, and they make the people who have that DNA stronger and balder. Apparently Neanderthal DNA can make you shorter, stockier, stronger, and balder. So there is some good and some bad that comes along with it. Coming in at number 8, we have Homo antecessor. These guys are old as hell. They might have been the oldest Homo sapien species in Western Europe. They were around when the first stone tools were ever being used. They must have been the coolest dudes in town. You have a group of dudes with the first spear ever. That would be like the first guy walking on the sun. It's thought that these ancestors walked the earth about 1.2 million years ago. The real estate market must have been amazing back then. You could probably get a beachside home for 3 rocks and a tiger tooth. Coming in at number 7 is Homo luanzensis. This extinct human ancestor has gone through a lot of changes over the years, and when I say changes, I mean what scientists have classified them as and whether or not they were even a race of people. Homo luanzensis was given the name U-Bag Man by some, which coincides with the name of a mythical creature that was said to live in the same caves where this ancestor's remains were discovered. It was in the Philippines, and when the bones were first found, local people thought this would give proof to the legend. After close examination, these findings were connected to humans. They weren't an extinct species, but just some of the oldest remains of our ancestors that have ever been discovered. But everyone changed their minds again when more evidence came forward and showed that this species was actually an offshoot of humans and a dead pygmy species.
Number 10, Homo gotengensis. Homo gotengensis are from about 1.8 million years ago to potentially as late as 0.8 million years ago, meaning that if the species is considered valid, they would be one of the earliest and one of the longest lived species of Homo. They had big teeth suitable for chewing plant materials. It was small-brained and was most likely an ecological specialist. This means that they could thrive in a wide variety of environmental conditions, and they had a varied diet. They apparently produced and used stone tools and may have even made fire, as there is evidence for burnt animal bones associated with their remains. This species stood just over 3 feet tall and weighed about 110 pounds. It could walk on 2 feet when on the ground, but probably spent a considerable amount of time in trees, feeding, sleeping, and escaping predators. Most of the researchers believe it lacked speech and language skills due to its anatomy and geological age. Researchers think that it was a close relative of Homo sapiens, but not necessarily a direct ancestor. Number 9, Homo habilis. Homo habilis, nicknamed Handyman, is an extinct species of archaic human from the early Pleistocene of East and South Africa about 2.31 million years ago to 1.65 million years ago. Homo habilis is the least similar to modern humans of all species in the genus Homo, and its classification as Homo has been a subject of controversial debate since its first proposal in the 1960s. Homo habilis were short and had disproportionately long arms compared to modern humans. I just gotta say, the visualization of that makes me laugh. They also had a cranial capacity slightly less than half the size of modern humans. Now, despite ape-like morphology of their bodies, their remains are often accompanied by primitive stone tools. Number 8, Homo rudolfensis. defenses. Homo rudefenses are from 1.9 million to 1.8 million years ago. Their physical build, weight, and height is still unknown due to the scarcity of cranial fossils. Paleoanthropologist Maeve Leakey and her team announced the discovery of a face and 2 jawbones belonging to Homo rudefenses on August 8, 2012. The males average 5 feet 3 inches in height and 130 pounds in weight, and females are 4 feet and 11 inches and weigh 112 pounds. They had small brain capacity and had large cheek teeth and thick enamel. They are not associated with tools, but dental anatomy suggests some processing of plant or meat fiber before consumption, though the mouth could still effectively chew through mechanically challenging food, indicating tool use did not greatly affect their diet. Number 7. Homo ergaster. Homo ergasters are believed to be from 1.4 to 1.7 million years ago, though a broader time range is possible. They had thinner bones, more protrusive face, and a lower forehead. This species had reduced sexual dysmorphism, meaning males and females were extremely similar, a smaller, less protrusive face, and a smaller dental arcade, and a larger cranial capacity. Homo ergaster remained stable for 500,000 years in Africa before disappearing from the fossil record around 1.4 million years ago. No identifiable cause has been attributed to this disappearance. But not only was Homo ergaster like modern humans in body, but also more in organization and being social than in any earlier species. It was thought for a long time that they were restricted in physical ability to regulate breathing and to produce complex sounds. This was based on cervical vertebrae, which were far narrow than in later humans. However, later discoveries of cervical vertebrae in Demisi, Georgia, which were 300,000 years older than those of the Turkana boy, were well within the normal range of human vertebrae range.
Coming in at number 6, we have Solo Man, Mr. Solo Dolo. No, I'm not going to recite a Kid Cudi song right now, but I will let you know about this extinct human species. Solo Man was found in 1931 in Indonesia, and it wasn't too far from where another extinct species was found, Java Man. At first it was thought that they could have been the same species, but after closer examination it was found that Solo Man had a much larger brain than Java Man, and certain findings suggested that Solo Man had one of the most advanced cultures of that era. They most likely existed in the same era as Homo sapiens, and they might have crossbred with them. I bet this ancestor's advanced culture leaked into our DNA, and that's how we were able to make the Fast and the Furious franchise. Coming in at number 5, we have Homo rhodesianensis. Now let's head over to Africa for this amazing discovery. The samples of Homo rhodesianensis, who was first called the Broken Skull Man, were found in 1921. Now some people think this was just another version of Homo heidelbergensis. Other people state that this is actually a subspecies of Heidelberg man. Final decision on where these guys line up on the genetic table is still unknown, but it can be agreed upon that they are all very dead. They most likely went extinct 100,000 years ago. I wonder what was the deciding factor that made it so our species could work through the fire and the flames and become the most powerful species on the planet, and have others that were so close to us genetically, some with even bigger brains, not able to survive. I think it was our charming good looks. We were able to woo our way into the future. Coming in at number 4, we have Peking Man. Now let's go over to China. Peking Man was discovered in Beijing. I'm surprised it took us this long to get over to China with these discoveries. Peking Man has a little bit of mystery in regards to its classification. The most commonly accepted stance is that it's an offshoot of Homo erectus, and it was alive around 750,000 years ago. Where the remains were discovered, there was a series of tools. This suggested that this ancestor was quite intelligent and likely hunted with stone tools and used stone weaponry. Coming in at number 3, we have Australopithecus africanus. Now let's shoot back over to Africa and go way back in time. We're shooting back in time almost 4 million years. It's thought that this ancestor was one of the first to start walking upright. The discovery was first thought to be that of some sort of ancient ape. There were a lot of similarities in the facial structure and the orbital bones, but there was something very different: the hole in the back of the head, the slot in which the spinal column slides into the skull so everything is connected and the brain can send signals down to the rest of your body. Now on primates this opening comes in on an angle, but with humans it comes in right from the bottom, meaning that A. africanus walked upright just like us. This could make this one of the oldest extinct human species ever. I would not want to deal with the monstrosities that this human had to deal with. Coming in at number 2 is Australopithecus sediba. This species might have existed alongside of Australopithecus africanus. The oldest dated discovery of this ancestor is 2 million years ago. This guy was wrestling down tigers before Tiger King even had the genetic code to be Tiger King. Because of the time period when this ancestor was walking the earth, it's thought that this could have been the species that evolved into the Homo genus. That is truly amazing. This species would have been the point of evolution where we started to become the people who we are today. We went from barely knowing how to use sticks to kill something to spreading K-pop all over the globe. We are truly amazing. Coming in at number 1, we have Denny. Here's where things are going to get a little bit crazy. What about hybrid humans, when you mix up different species? I mean, we know that this has been happening. We still have people living today with ancient DNA in their bodies. Now, Denny, or Denisova 11, was the body of a 13-year-old girl that seemed to have a mix of 2 separate species. It's thought that she was a cross between Neanderthals and Denisovians. It would seem that somehow both of Denny's parents were not of the same species, and this brings up a lot of questions as to how these 2 separate tribes of humans interacted. Was it normal for crossbreeding to take place, or was this just a one-time deal? Perhaps both of her parents were excommunicated from their separate tribes and then ran into each other. Or were Denisovians and Neanderthals always hanging out and chilling and doing cool stuff?
Number 6. Red Deer Cave People. The Red Deer Cave People were the most recently known prehistoric population that do not resemble modern humans. Fossils dated between 14,500 and 11,500 years old were found in Red Deer Cave and Logan Cave in China. Mix of archaic and modern features, they are tentatively thought to be a separate species of humans that became extinct without contributing to the gene pool of modern humans. Evidence shows large deer were cooked in the Red Deer Cave, giving the people their name. Now, during the period the Red Deer Cave people lived, all other prehistoric human species such as neanderthals were thought to have died out. In spite of their relatively recent age, the fossils exhibit features of more primitive humans. The Red Deer Cave dwellers had the following distinctive features that differ from modern humans: flat face, broad nose, jutting jaw with no chin, large molars, prominent brows, thick skull bones, and moderate-sized brain. Although the physical features of the Red Deer Cave people have suggested that they may be a previously undiscovered species of prehistoric human, the scientists who discovered them are reluctant to classify them as a new species. Number 5. Homo floresiensis. Homo floresiensis, nicknamed Hobbit, is widely believed to be an extinct species in the genus Homo. They inhabited in the islands of Flores, Indonesia, until the arrival of modern humans about 50,000 years ago. The remains of an individual that would have stood about 3.5 feet in height were discovered in 2003 on the island of Flores, Indonesia. Partial skeletons of 9 individuals have been recovered, including 1 complete skull. These remains have been the subject of intense research to determine whether they represent a species distinct from modern humans. They are remarkable for their small body and brain, and for their survival until relatively recent times, possibly as recent as 12,000 years ago. Recovered alongside the skeletal remains were stone tools from archaeological horizons ranging from 94,000 to 13,000 years ago. Now, some scholars suggest that the historical Homo floresiensis may be connected to folk memory de Ubo Gogo myths prevalent on the Isle of Flores, and I hope I said that right. Number 4. Homo antecessor. Homo antecessor were recorded in the Spanish Sierra productive archaeological site from 1.2 to 0.8 million years ago. They were about 5.5 to 6 feet tall, and males weighed around 200 pounds. Their brain sizes were large, but smaller than the average of modern humans. Very little is known about the physiological of Homo antecessor. Homo antecessor may have been right-handed, a trait that makes the species different from other apes. This hypothesis is based on tomography techniques. It's also claimed that the frequency range of audition is similar to Homo sapiens, which makes us suspect that they used a symbolic language and were able to reason. A team is currently pursuing a DNA map of Homo antecessor based on their teeth eruption pattern. Researchers think that Homo antecessor had the same development stages as Homo sapiens, though probably at a faster pace. Other significant features demonstrated by the species are protruding occipital bun, a low forehead, and a lack of a strong chin. The molar was described as well worn and from an individual between 20 and 25 years of age. Additional findings announced on the 27th of March 2008 included the discovery of a mandible fragment, bone flakes, and evidence of animal bone processing. Number 3. Homo naledi. Homo naledi were discovered in 2013 in the Rising Star Cave, Cradle of Human humankind, South Africa, dating 335,000 to 236,000 years ago. The initial discovery comprises of 1,550 specimens representing 737 elements and at least 15 different individuals. They had a small cranial capacity and are estimated to have averaged 4 feet 9 inches in height and 88 pounds in weight. They were more arboreal than other Homo, better adapted to climbing and suspensory behavior in trees than endurance running. Tooth anatomy suggests consumption of gritty foods covered in particles such as dirt or dust. Though they have not been associated with stone tools or any indication of material culture, they appear to have been dexterous enough to produce and handle tools and likely manufactured early or middle Stone Age industries. Because the skeletons show such a strange mixture of modern and ancient features, it's not clear where they belong in the human evolutionary tree. Unconfirmed reports suggest that they were actually alive just a few 100,000 years ago, and if that age is confirmed, we have a new mystery to explore. How could a human that looks so primitive survive until so recently? Number 2. Homo heidelbergensis. Homo heidelbergensis are likely to be descended from Africa. They had a larger brain case overlapping the average of modern humans and had more advanced tools and behavior. It has been given a separate species of classification. Male heidelbergensis average about 5 feet 9 inches tall and 136 pounds. Females averaged 5 feet and 2 inches and 112 pounds. Findings in a pit of Spain of 28 human skeletons suggest that the Homo heidelbergensis might have been the first species of Homo genus to bury its dead. They also acquired a pre-linguistic system of communication. No forms of art or sophisticated artifacts other than stone tools have been uncovered, although red ochre, a mineral that can be used to mix a red pigment which is useful as paint, has been found around Terra Amata excavations in the south of France. The morphology of the outer and middle ears suggests that they had auditory sensitivity similar to modern humans and very different from chimpanzees. They're probably able to differentiate between many different sounds. Dental wear analysis suggests that they were likely to be right-handed as modern people. 500,000-year-old hafted stone points used for hunting are found and tested by a way as use wear replication. And coming in at number 1 is Homo erectus. Homo erectus are from about 2 million years ago. As the name implies, Homo erectus is the first known Homo species that stood fully upright. It featured other modern human proportions distinct to those from apes, shorter arms relative to the torso, and long legs adapted for walking and running rather than climbing trees. They had the cranial capacity greater than that of Homo habilis, overlapping that of the Homo sapiens. The frontal bone is less sloped, and the dental arcade is smaller. The face is less protrusive, with large brow ridges and less prominent cheekbones. They stood about 5 feet 10 inches, and to put that in perspective, only 17% of modern male humans are taller. They were slender with long arms and legs. The sexual dysmorphism between the males and females was slightly greater than seen in Homo sapiens, with males being about 25% larger than females. Homo erectus, however, used primitive tools. It has been suggested that Homo erectus may have been the first hominoid to use rafts to travel over oceans, which is just crazy to me. East African sites also show some possible evidence that fire was utilized by early humans. Archaeologists also found red clay shards dated to be 1.42 million years old. Now, reheating these shards shows that the clay must be heated to 400 degrees Celsius, aka 752 degrees Fahrenheit, to harden, so they most likely used fire for this. For their diet, meat was a major part of it. Homo erectus was probably the first hominoid to live in small, familiar band societies similar to modern hunter-gatherer band societies. Homo erectus is thought to be the first homoid to hunt in coordinated groups, use complex tools, and care for infirm or weak companions. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 extinct human species we were never taught about in school. I for one am glad that we used Homo sapiens and have an easy name to pronounce.
Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have Australopithecus anamensis. Back in 1965, a research team led by Brian Patterson found a single arm bone of an early human at a site which was located in northern Kenya. This was an amazing find, but without additional human fossils, they were unable to identify exactly which species it belonged to. Skip to 1994 and another research team at the same site were able to find numerous teeth and bone fragments, and through these additional samples they were able to determine that these were fossils of a very primitive hominin, and they were able to name a new species. This species had a combination of traits that can be found in both apes as well as humans. The upper end of the tibia or the shin bone shows us signs that it is likely that this species was able to walk on 2 feet. Because of the long forearms and certain features that were found in the wrist bones, it is also suggested that this species likely climbed trees as well. Based on their jaws and teeth, we think that they were likely plant eaters in general, and that their diet mostly consisted of fruits and nuts. In our number 9 spot today, we have Australopithecus afarensis. I actually had never learned of this species before researching for this video, but it turns out that this is one of the longest lived and best known early human species, as researchers have been able to uncover the remains of more than 300 individuals. It is said that this species was first seen somewhere between 3.85 and 2.95 million years ago, and that they survived for an impressive 900,000 years, which is 4 times longer than we as Homo sapiens have been around. More similar to chimpanzees than modern humans, the children of this species grew quite rapidly after birth, and they reached adulthood faster than we do, which means that they likely had less time for parental guidance and socialization. This species had both human and ape-like characteristics. They had more ape-like face proportions and a brain case for a brain 1/3 the size of a modern human brain. They had long, strong arms and curved fingers, which showed that they must have climbed trees. This ability to live both on the ground and in trees is likely what helped them to survive for almost a million years through climate and environmental changes. In our number 8 spot today, we have Kenyanthropus platyops. Sorry, I don't speak Latin. This is one of the more mysterious early human species, as there is still so much we don't know about them. What we do know is that they lived in Kenya about 3.5 million years ago, and that they lived at the same time as Australopithecus afarensis we just talked about. Despite them living at the same time, however, this species had smaller molars, which researchers believe reflects a different diet. This means that these two species likely did not have to compete for food. There are some people who believe that us as Homo sapiens are related to this species because of their facial features that are more similar to modern humans compared to the faces of other human species that existed at the time. Not everyone in the scientific community is convinced yet, but hopefully once more specimens and fossils are found, we will be able to get a solid answer. This species remains the only one in their genus, with their name translating to flat-faced from Kenya. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Sahelanthropus chadensis. This species is one of the oldest known in the human family tree. We are starting right at the beginning. This species is said to have lived about 6 to 7 million years ago in West Central Africa. It is thought that they had the ability to walk upright, and this may have helped them diversify the habitats that they could live in. Although we only have cranial remains of this species, studies have shown that they likely had a mix of ape-like and human-like features. The ape-like features include a small brain, a sloping face, really prominent brow ridges, and an elongated skull. In terms of human-like features, it is said that they had smaller canine teeth, a shorter middle part of their face, and a spinal cord opening underneath the skull, which likely helped them to walk on 2 feet. It wasn't until 2001 when the remains of this species were discovered, making it quite a recent discovery. With this discovery came the knowledge that early humans were a bit more widespread at the time than we had originally believed. In our number 9 spot today, we have Aurorantogenesis. Also referred to as the Millennium Man, this species is another one of the earliest on the human family tree, and they are said to have lived about 6 million years ago. This species was discovered in 2001 by a team of French paleontologists who were searching in the Tunjan Hills region of central Kenya. Here they found over a dozen fossils that belonged to the early humans of this time period. The people of this species are said to have been about the size of a chimpanzee, and they had small teeth with thick enamel, not unlike us modern humans. While any discovery of early human remains is fascinating and super important, it is said that the most important fossil from this species is that of an upper femur, which shows evidence that this is a species that was bipedal. They likely still climbed trees and that sort of a thing, but they also likely walked upright. In our number 8 spot today, we have Ardipithecus cadava. This is a species that had its discovery in 1997, but when the paleontologist who first found a piece of lower jaw lying on the ground, he didn't think that he had just discovered a new species. After 10 more specimens were found, however, it was safe to say that a new early human ancestor had been identified. The remains, which included this jaw as well as hand and foot bones, partial arm bones, and a collarbone, were dated back to about 5.6 to 5.8 million years ago. The toe bones showed us that this species walked on 2 feet, and the fossils of other animals found in the area where these early human remains were found showed that they lived in a mix of woodlands and grasslands. Because we have jaw remains, we have been able to conclude that they likely ate a variety of fibrous foods. Their back teeth were larger than a chimpanzee's, but their front teeth were more narrow.
Coming in at number 10, we have Homo heidelbergensis, also known as Heidelberg Man. This extinct human ancestor walked the earth about 600,000 years ago in Africa, parts of Asia, and Europe. They are believed to be the direct ancestors of Neanderthals, and some archaeologists even argue that they are archaic or early Neanderthals. Heidelberg Man was an exceptionally tall ancient man. They hunted and butchered large prey, and may be the first species of Homo to intentionally bury their dead. I wonder what those funerals must have been like. It was like Gloop Herp was a very fast runner, but he wasn't so fast that he didn't get mauled by a saber-toothed tiger. And now let's move on before the same thing happens to all of us. At number 9, we have Homo rudolphinus. This extinct human ancestor is only known through a small number of fossil bone fragments. There have been some debate on whether or not Rudolphinus is the earliest known member of the Homo genus or is a very late member of the Australopithecus genus. Due to the scant nature of the remains, not much is known about the species, but evidence suggests that the brains were proportionately larger than the other earliest members of the Homo genus. These guys were huge eggheads. No wonder they didn't make it for a very long time. I don't think nerds would have fared well before laws were invented. Well, they did have laws back then. It was just who could punchy punch the bestie best. Next up at number 8 is Java Man. This early human was actually made up of 80% coffee, and that's how it got its name. And the reason it went extinct was because it was brewed to death. That's a stupid dad joke. And hopefully you didn't believe that because I just made that up. But this next part is true. In the early 1890s, the tooth and skull cap and thigh bone of an extinct human species were found by a team of archaeologists in East Java. That's what gave this discovery the nickname Java Man. It was a big deal at the time, as the bones at that point were the oldest known hominid ever discovered. It was originally argued by some archaeologists that Java Man was the ancestor of Homo erectus, but there were some who said that it was the so-called missing link between ape and man. Coming in hot at number 7 on this list is Homo denisova. One of the more recent discoveries of an extinct human species was made in the Denisova cave in Siberia as recent as 2008. Only very few remains have been discovered so far, but thanks to advanced DNA analysis, it has been possible to sequence the genome of Homo denisova. It has been possible to show that some people in Tibet have snippets of Denisovian DNA, the same way that some Europeans have tiny percentages of Neanderthal DNA. Coming in at number 6, we're bringing you Pengu Man. He was made out of clay and his mother beats him with a frying pan, while everyone in his life is extremely volatile. If you don't understand that reference, I feel very sorry for you. Another extinct human found in 2008 was homosapien. If you can't say that name, just call him the catchier nickname Pengu Man. I struggle with that every single time. Pengu Man's fossilized mandible was discovered by fishermen working near Pengu Islands off the coast of Taiwan. It is extremely thick and has gigantic teeth, which puzzled scientists for several reasons. They were like, how did a creature that didn't have access to a high-carb diet and squats get so thick? I'm just kidding on that one. They have been able to determine that it was the mandible of a previously unknown species, and that it was probably very similar to Homo erectus, but larger. It has so far not been possible to date this fossil, so they are not sure when the species was alive, but finding this incredibly strange fossil with very little to compare it to, it is clear that it doesn't exist anymore. Thankfully. We are at the halfway point of this list, and for number 5, we are at Menisi Man. Homo georgicus, otherwise known as Menisi Man, is a species of extinct human which has been found in Menisi, Georgia. The species has a very small brain, unlike many of our extinct ancestors. The 5 skulls, which are evidence of Homo georgicus, were discovered in 1991, and since then they've been subject to much debate. They may have been an intermediary between Homo erectus and Homo habilis, but there are some scientists who think their skulls are simply examples of Homo erectus. Despite having small brains, the fossils are associated with a total of 73 tools, which proves that a large brain is not always necessary to use tools. Although I would not want to be around the dude who has a small brain and a bunch of tools. He's either going to do a terrible job fixing your car, or he's going to be rooting around your insides before you have the chance to introduce yourself. Coming in at number 4, we have the Red Deer Cave People, the most recently known archaic human to go extinct. The remains of the Red Deer Cave People have been dated approximately 11,500 years ago, meaning they were still around about 28,500 years after the last pure Neanderthal. Some scientists think the Red Deer Cave People were a hybrid of Homo denisova and modern humans, but attempts to sequence their DNA have not proved successful, so it's currently impossible to say for sure. We're finally down to the top 3 here of the most amazing top 10 list of scary extinct human species, and now we have Homo naledi. Evidence of Homo naledi was unearthed in 2013 in a cave in South Africa by cavers who were able to access a chamber in the Rising Star cave system for the very first time. 30 meters down or 90 98 feet below the surface, it's strewn with thousands of bones which have unique and interesting features, with 1,550 currently excavated and many more remaining in the cave. Some of their features are archaic and resembling specimens from 20 million years ago, but they also have more modern hominid features, and their bones have been dated about 250,000 years ago. It has been concluded that they are not direct ancestors of modern humans. Coming in at number 2 on the list, we have the Hobbit. In 2004, researchers made an announcement that a discovery had been made on the island of Flores, Indonesia. The people on the island had long talked about Ubu Gogo, a race of short-haired hairy men who lived in the caves. Astonishingly, the discovery of stone tools and the remains of a small hominid in the cave on the island seemed to prove the legend right. The official name was Homo floresiensis after the island, but they have become known as the Hobbit. Homo floresiensis was approximately 3.5 feet tall with large feet. The Hobbit had very primitive features and a small brain, like our earliest Australopithecine ancestors, but they were able to use tools and also may have been able to hunt and use fire. Using fire back then must have made you the biggest badass of all time. You could just wave it around and everyone would have thought you were a god, and they would have for sure thought you could just like dance really cool or something like that would go along with the fire. And the moment you've all been waiting for, we are at number 1 on our list, and for number 1 we have the ghost ancestor. A study published in 2019 has shared evidence of yet an undiscovered extinct human ancestor proposed after an AI program determined that there was a ghost population of archaic humans which interbred with modern humans in the distant past. Researchers think the unknown ancestor may have been an offshoot of Homo denisova based on the evidence. With new techniques such as this and advances in fields such as DNA analysis, it is now possible to learn more about extinct species of human than ever before. New species are being discovered and identified with relative frequency, and the earliest discoveries can now be reassessed and analyzed with greater detail. The evidence is pointing not to one unbroken chain of human ancestors, but a rich family tree and a number of offshoots. Exactly how many extinct relatives we have we will probably never know for sure, but with each discovery we are able to add new unique pieces to the puzzle of who we are. But wait, that's not all that we have for you on today's top 10 list, guys. People living today who are in Europe, Asia, and Eurasia have well-defined Neanderthal-derived segments in their genome. These fragments are traces of interbreeding that followed the out-of-Africa human migration dating about 60,000 years ago. They imply that children born with Neanderthal modern human pairings outside of Africa were raised among the modern human and ultimately bred with other humans, explaining how bits of Neanderthal DNA remain in the human genome. The plot thickens. Are previous human species embedded within us somehow? Did we evolve from so-called extinct species that I just presented you with? If you weren't scared listening before, then you might be a little bit scared right now.
In our number 7 spot today, we have Ardipithecus ramidus. This is a species that was first reported in 1994, but in 2009, scientists announced that there had been a partial skeleton found. The remains were given the nickname Ardi, and they showed some interesting evidence when it came to trying to determine how this species walked. The foot bones in the skeleton are said to, quote, indicate a divergent large toe combined with a rigid foot. Apparently, this means that we are kind of unsure exactly how they might have walked, but with a pelvis reconstructed from crushed remains that were found, experts found adaptations that would allow both tree climbing as well as bipedal activities. Ardi's remains were discovered alongside other animal remains that showed she lived in a more wooded environment, which showed us that early human species started walking on 2 feet for reasons other than because they lived in open grassy areas. In our number 6 spot today, we have Homo gottingensis. This is an early human species that is said to have quite large teeth which help them chew up their heavy plant diet. This species is said to have still had quite small brains, but that they also likely produced stone tools and that they may have even made fires, as there is evidence of burnt animal bones alongside their remains that have been found. This species wasn't the tallest of the early humans, standing at about 3 feet tall. This species walked upright on 2 feet, but experts have said that they likely spent a significant amount of time in the trees. Researchers believe that this species lacked speech and language skills, and because of their anatomy and their geological age, at this point in time, experts think that while we, as modern humans, are a close relative of this species, we are not a direct ancestor. In our number 5 spot today, we have Homo ergaster. This is a species that has caused quite a controversy in the scientific world. Some experts out there believe that this species should be combined into the species of H. erectus that we spoke about on part 1 of this series, but not everyone is on board with this idea. This is still a dispute that is ongoing with those who are responsible for classifying these sorts of of things, but as of right now they are still their own classification with a name that roughly translates to working man. This name comes from the more advanced tools this species used in comparison to some of the older ancestors. Fossils found from this species are said to date back somewhere between 1.7 to 1.4 million years ago, but it is noted that they may have lived for a longer time than this. Some of the features that separate this species from others of their time are their longer legs, their larger body mass, their smaller jaws and teeth, which shows a change in diet, and just different body proportions in general. Some researchers believe that this species might be the earliest true representative of the genus Homo, which is the one that we belong to. In our number 4 spot today we have Homo capranensis. So this species is a tricky one. Basically, we aren't entirely sure about this group yet. This is actually a proposed name for a human species that is only known from one single specimen that was found. Found in 1994, this discovery came in the form of a skull cap and was found in Italy by an Italian archaeologist named Italo Bedettiu. The features found on this bone are sort of in the middle between some of the other more well-known early human species. The remains were nicknamed the Caprano Man after a nearby town, and the remains were dated back to somewhere from 500,000 to 350,000 years ago. Hopefully with more research, maybe we can find other similar remains and learn more about this really mysterious species. In our number 3 spot today we have Homo rhodensiensis. This is a species that was discovered when researchers found the cranium of a member of the species in a lead and zinc mine located in what is now Zambia. This skull was found in 1921 by a man named Tom Zwigler, who was a Swiss miner actually. Aside from the skull, the species has been able to be identified through other remains that were also found, which includes an upper jawbone, a sacrum, a tibia, and 2 other femur fragments. According to experts, it is said that whoever the skull that was found belonged to must have been quite a large man. It also features one of the largest brow ridges of any hominid remains. This skull was initially called the Rhodesian man, but it is now mostly referred to as the Broken Hill skull or the Cobway cranium. In our number 2 spot today we have Homo sapiens adultu. This group is an extinct subspecies of Homo sapiens that is said to have lived about 160,000 years ago in Pleistocene Africa. The adultu part of the name of this species comes from the Saho-Afar word that means eldest or firstborn. This species was able to be identified from remains that were found at Hertoburi, which is in Ethiopia. The region is one that is under volcanic layers, and while these remains were first found in 1997 by Tim White, it wasn't until 2003 that they were first unveiled. Among the remains were 3 well-preserved crania or skulls, the best preserved one being from an adult male. In our number 1 spot today we have the Red Deer Cave people. This is a group of people who are the most recent group found to not resemble modern humans. The fossils that have been found have been able to be dated back to somewhere around 14,000 to 11,000 years ago. These fossils were found in the Red Deer Cave and Longling Cave, which are located in China. These fossils showed that these people had a mix of archaic and more modern features, so it is thought that they could perhaps be a separate species of humans that, prior to their extinction, didn't end up contributing to the gene pool that created us modern humans. It's a strange discovery because of how recent they are thought to have lived. By this time, all other prehistoric human species were thought to have died out. This, coupled with their more primitive features, is why some scientists believe they are a species yet to be classified, but other scientists are still a bit reluctant, which is why they don't yet have a scientific name. In our number 7 spot today we have Australopithecus africanus. This is a species of early human that does have similarity to others on this list, with a mix of human and ape-like features. Compared to some of the others, however, this species had a rounder cranium that held a larger brain, and they also had smaller teeth. The remains found of this species signify that they did walk on 2 legs, but their arms and hands show that they were also still climbing at this time in the evolution of humans. This species had males that grew to be about 4 feet and 6 inches, while the females grew to be about 3 feet 9 inches. For a while it was believed that this might be one of the first human species that hunted animals because of the fact that many of the remains were found among broken animal bones, teeth, and horns. But it was later realized that both these animals and this early human species were just victims of the same predators: lions, leopards, and hyenas. It is now believed that the diet of the species was similar to that of chimpanzees, with fruits, plants, nuts and seeds, roots, insects, and eggs being their main source of food. In our number 6 spot today, we have Paranthropus aethiopicus. In 1967, the existence of this species was first proposed by a team of French paleontologists who had discovered a toothless mandible that was thought to differ from the other early human species that were known at the time. Many people kind of brushed it off to the side because of the fact that it seemed a little too early to name an entirely different species based on one incomplete mandible. Flash forward to 1985, however, and we have the discovery of what is known as the black skull. Found just west of Lake Turkana in Kenya, this skull confirmed what those who discovered that jawbone had thought. This skull had a dark color to it from the minerals in the soil that were absorbed by the skull as it fossilized, and it was able to show a species that had a mix of both derived and primitive traits. This is when we confirmed the past existence of this new species, dating back to at least 2.5 million years ago in Eastern Africa. In our number 5 spot today, we have Australopithecus gari. With a name that translates to surprise, this species definitely wasn't one that researchers expected to find. This is quite a mysterious species, with much of what they and their lives were like remaining hidden in the past, but what we do know is that this might have been one of the first human species to use stone tools. And it doesn't stop there. While fossils of this species are associated with or were found with some of the earliest known stone tools, they were also found along with animal bones that were cut and broken open with the tools. This may mean that this species was also among the first to have a diet that included meat and bone marrow from large animals. That is a huge moment in terms of human history. I mean, it likely changed the development of humans as a whole. This species is believed to have lived about 2.5 million years ago, and some experts believe that they may be an ancestor of ours. In our number 4 spot today, we have Paranthropus boisei. This is a species that is said to have lived somewhere around 2.3 to 1.2 million years ago. Like others in this genus, they are said to be characterized by a special skull that was adapted for more heavy chewing. This adaptation is seen in the appearance of this species, as they had much wider faces and molars and premolars that are about 4 times the size of modern humans. They also had the thickest dental enamel of any known early human, which I guess is a fun fact you can use the next time somebody asks you. Because of their appearance and these features, researchers speculate that this species had a bit of a rough diet. Experts believe that while when they could, they likely ate many fruits and plants, when they had to, they also had the ability to resort to tough roots and nuts. While this species lived for quite some time on this planet and coexisted with other early human species, most experts agree that they are not in the ancestral line that led to us modern humans. In our number 3 spot today, we have Australopithecus sediba. This species is an important one when it comes to us because some suggest that looking at the remains and fossils we have of them may just give us valuable insight into the origins and the ancestor of the genus Homo, which is what we are. We don't really know our family tree, so to speak, all the way from the first early human species, so this might just give us some clues that can help figure it out. Said to have lived between 1.97 and 1.98 million years ago, this species has traits that are similar to some of the other earlier human species we talked about, but also some traits that are more similar to us. Remains of this species show us that it is likely that walking on 2 feet was probably their most usual form of movement. This was mostly seen in changes to the pelvis, which shows us that this is one of the first things that really changed when it came to early humans evolving these more modern traits. What is peculiar, however, is that there is also evidence that this species walked in a completely different way than any other species before it. It is said that they walked on 2 feet, but each step they had their foot turned inward with the weight focused on the outer edge of their foot. This shows us that it might be likely that the way we walk evolved through a bunch of different paths, which is kinda cool. In our number 2 spot today, we have Paranthropus robustus. Back in 1938, scientist Robert Broom bought a fossil jaw fragment and molar that was said to belong to a previously known early human species. When he examined these specimens, however, he felt as though they were different from any of the other he had seen in his career. This led to him taking a trip to South Africa to explore the site they were said to have come from. Here, he collected many more bones and teeth, and he was able to discover this previously unknown species with a name that translates to beside eyed man. Said to have lived 1.8 to 1.2 million years ago, this species still remains much of a mystery. Scientists still aren't exactly sure which other human species this one evolved from, but what we do know about them is one of their practices that they had with the use of bone tools. With these tools, there has been evidence found that this species liked to dig into termite mounds. Researchers are trying to find out if this practice was more regional or if it was shared across the entire species. In our number 1 spot today, we have Homo heidelbergensis. In 1908 in Germany, a workman discovered a jawbone that was nearly complete with the exception of the missing premolars and the first 2 left molars. With more examination, it was realized that this was the discovery of an entirely new species. This early human species had a very large brow ridge and a large brain case. They also had a flatter face than other early human species, but perhaps the most interesting thing about them is that they are the first known human species to live in a colder climate. This species is said to have had short, wide bodies that were likely an evolutionary adaptation to conserve heat. Dated back to about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago, this species lived at the time that we know as the earliest example of when human species were able to control fire, as well as the earliest known use of wooden spears. This is also said to have been the first known human species to routinely hunt large animals. Another remarkable feat of this species is that they were the first to build shelters, as they created little dwellings made from wood and rock. It is unclear exactly how they used these dwellings, but they changed the course of history with this new ground. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Homo habilis. Alright, starting off this list, we have the Homo habilis, which is said to translate to meaning handyman. This is a species of humans that evolved in Africa sometime prior to 2 million years ago, so clearly quite some time ago. It is believed that Homo habilis went extinct about 1.5 million years ago. By the middle of the 20th century, it was starting to be accepted that humans first evolved in Africa from an early group of hominins known as Australopiths. Back in 1960, however, a research team in Tanzania found fossils that would sort of confirm this in a way. This fossil was one that sort of fell in the gap between Australopiths and humans as we know them. It was the discovery of Homo habilis, the first true human species to evolve. From what has been found, which is mostly fragmentary fossils, it has been determined that H. habilis seemed to have a brain that was significantly larger than Australopiths and more similar to later human species. It is believed that H. habilis behaved in a human way, like they made stone tools, which at the time was thought to be different than their previous ancestors. This is exactly part of the reason they were named handyman, but at this point in time we now know that Australopiths also made tools, but the name of H. habilis still stands and they are very important in the course of our evolution. In our number 9 spot today we have Homo antecessor. The discovery of this species starts out at a huge archaeological site in Spain called the Gran Dolina Cave. This cave has a rich history, but as relates to this list, at this site there has been found the remains of a hominin group called Homo antecessor. This discovery came in 1997 and this species is often described as having a mix of modern and quote primitive traits. It was thought that there were similarities with this species between both other species like neanderthals but also with Homo sapiens. This was able to be confirmed through DNA sequencing, or really a study of ancient proteins that were extracted from dental enamel of one of the fossils. They were also able to prove that this species was a closely related or sister lineage to modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, which shows that they all must have shared some common ancestor. In our number 8 spot today we have Homo naledi. Also called the Star Man, this species certainly was an interesting one as they had quite an unusual mix of features. It is said that parts of their skeletons would be indistinguishable from modern humans, but there were other parts that seemed almost quote ape-like. This species also had a brain that was only slightly larger than a chimpanzee, but they were still capable of sophisticated and more modern human-like behavior. No one is exactly sure when these guys existed or when exactly they went extinct, and it isn't quite clear where they sit in the evolutionary tree, but some experts believed that they may have lived at the same time as H. habilis we already talked about. They believed that they probably went extinct more than 1 million years ago after being outcompeted by later species like H. erectus. There are others who don't agree with this, however, and who believed that this species lived much more recently, but then that begs the question as to how humans who looked so primitive could have survived until so recently. In our number 7 spot today we have Homo erectus. As I just mentioned in the last point, we have Homo erectus, or the upright man. It is thought that this human species also evolved in Africa, this time somewhere around 2 million years ago, and they went on to quickly expand and spread throughout Eurasia. At this point in time, it is debated exactly when this species went extinct, but it is believed to be around 143,000 years ago. While this species isn't the most well known, they are extremely important to our evolution. They looked like and behaved in similar ways to us, and they were the earliest known human species to have migrated long distances, which is not only an exceptional feat, but also really important to our world today. It is believed that this might be the earliest known species who was able to learn how to control fire, and also quite possibly the first to cook their foods. This opened the way for a better diet with improved nutrition, which then paved the way for the evolution of a larger and more demanding brain. In our number 6 spot today, we have Homo neanderthalensis. We are talking about the most well-known extinct human species now, the Neanderthals. How well known they are might be contributed to the fact that they were the first ancient human species to be discovered by scientists around 200 years ago. Neanderthals were thought to have first appeared in Eurasia about 200,000 years ago, and they lived until somewhere around 40,000 years ago. It is often said that Neanderthals are like a cousin of us Homo sapiens, and that we share some sort of similar parent species with them. Despite these similarities, it isn't exactly clear when the split from the line happened between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, but some believe it may have been over 1 million years ago. Neanderthals are known for their sophisticated tools made from stone and bones, and it is thought that they might have taken advantage of fires that were caused by lightning, which showed that they were, of course, also able to control fire. It is thought that Neanderthals also practiced self-medication and that they made art, which only suggests that they might have been more cognitively advanced than people once believed. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Homo longi. This species is one of the most recently proposed hominin species, and they are thought to have originated in China. The skull that led to the discovery of this species was first found in the 1930s, but it wasn't until recently that it was made available for scientific study and analysis. The skull is thought to have come from about 146,000 years ago, and with this new information, it is thought that this skull might have brought forward a quote long lost sister lineage of Homo sapiens. The eye sockets of this skull are said to be large and blocky, the molars are much larger than ours would be, and the brow ridge is said to be quite sizable. These are all considered primitive traits, but what's not primitive is the size of the brain, which is completely comparable to modern humans. This discovery is one that just reminds us how difficult it is to designate a new species with such limited resources available in terms of evidence. At this point in time, it isn't exactly clear where they fit in on the evolutionary tree, but it certainly is quite interesting, and it reminds us how complicated human evolution really is. In our number 4 spot today, we have Homo rudolfensis. So this is a species that has very little evidence. Really just a single specimen. A skull. This specimen, also referred to as KNMER1470, is believed to have come from about 1.9 million years ago, and it was found in what was once known as Kubifora, but it is now Kenya. The skull was originally thought to be from the species H. habilis, the one we started this list with, but there were a few problems with this classification. Firstly, the brain case of the skull was quite big. H. habilis had brains around 500 cubic centimeters, but this brain case would have allowed for a brain the size of 700 cubic centimeters. This skull also had large teeth and a smaller brow ridge than what would have been seen on the skull of an H. habilis. This is exactly why experts concluded that this skull belonged to a previously unknown species, even accounting for the differences that might have been seen between males and females. That is exactly why this separate species was designated back in 1986. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Denisovans. So this is a group that was discovered in a completely different way than the other species on this list. For most of the other species, we found fossils or remains that showed their distinct differences from other species, and these discoveries gave us very valuable insights into what their lives might have been like and around when they lived, but the discovery of these guys, we have little to no information on their skeletons, their appearance, or how they behaved, but we still know of their existence, and that's all thanks to DNA and genetics information. So basically, researchers found fragments of teeth and bones that were 50,000 years old in a cave in Siberia. Based on their age and the location they were found, everyone just assumed that the DNA extracted from them would match Neanderthals, but that did not happen. Instead, when they were tested in 2010, it was discovered that these bones belonged to a human species that is estimated to have last shared an ancestor with Neanderthals about 765,000 years ago. Right now, this species hasn't been given a scientific name, and this reluctance is due to the fact that so little is known about them. Through more research though, which is of course currently ongoing, it is thought that they might be formally recognized as a species or subspecies Homo denisova. In our number 2 spot today we have Homo floresiensis. This species is honestly a bit of an evolutionary mystery or puzzle that is super interesting. It is believed that they lived on the Indonesian island of Flores sometime between 100,000 to 50,000 years ago, but it is also believed that ancestors of this species might have been present on the island at least 700,000 years ago. The puzzling part comes in when we talk about their appearance because it's just so different from ours. They wouldn't have stood over 3 feet tall, they had short bodies, super long feet, and a very small brain. This wouldn't have been all that strange when it came to the earliest human species like H. habilis when that species was wandering around Africa over 2 million years ago, but we are talking about a species that lives thousands of kilometers away and that was only alive 50,000 years ago. They're also thought to have behaved in a similar way to other early humans, like with the ability to control fire, cook food, that sort of thing. That is exactly why experts aren't quite sure how H. floresiensis fits into the evolutionary tree, but it is possible that they might have found themselves stranded on this island, and that is the cause for their hugely different evolutionary path. In our number 1 spot today we have Homo luzonensis. Another island-dwelling population, this species was discovered on the island of Luzon in the Philippines, and it is thought that they lived there around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago. This species was discovered through just 13 bones from teeth, fingers, toes, and a femur that were found on the island. These remains belonged to 3 different individuals, but they gave us an incredibly valuable insight into this previously unknown species. In 2019, it was determined that these bones were different enough from the other known past human species that they were then classified into their own new species category. It is crazy to think that it's still so recently that we are discovering brand new species that are so important to the history of humans and how we got here today. It is said that the toe and finger bones of this species are quite interesting as they are slightly curved, which is a feature that is shared by living species of tree-dwelling primates. It is thought that this may suggest that for H. luzonensis, living in trees might have still been a part of their lifestyle.
Coming in at number 10 we have Homo guntengensis. We are starting off with an ancestor that might have had a smaller brain than most of our other predecessors, but it seemed that this creature was quite resourceful. Homo guntengensis was a species that seemed to have the ability to use fire. It's unknown how it learned this skill, maybe it was passed down from generation to generation like we do with driving or watching American Idol. The way that scientists are able to make this assumption is from charred bones that were found along with the fossils of Homo guntengensis. This means that this prehistoric man was cooking its meat before it ate it. Imagine you were the first guy to cook food, you bring a girl over for a date and you're like, hey, you want some charred meat? You are for sure getting a second date. However, it seems from this ancestor's teeth that meat wasn't often on the menu. They had large flat teeth which are commonly associated with herbivores. It also seemed that Homo guntengensis lived mostly in trees. It might have come down occasionally to hunt or forage for food, but outside of that, trees are where this creature loved to live. Coming in at number 9 we have Homo ergaster. Moving over to Africa now, there's a reason they call Africa the cradle of civilization. It seems that a lot of our ancestors have come from this place, and this is where a good chunk of Homo ergaster's remains were found. Homo ergaster was a transitional ancestor. It seemed to have a weaker bone structure compared to similar species. This would mean that Homo ergaster had started moving into a lifestyle that was less dominated by physical conflict. There's also a lot of evidence that showed Homo ergaster had a more advanced system of social interaction. I mean, they weren't sharing K-pop songs together, but they were gathering in large groups. Who knows what they could have been doing back then? I think it was probably beatbox battling. That's just my highly educated scientific opinion. You You don't have to believe me, but I'm on part 3 of this series, so I think I would know. Coming in at number 8 is homosapien. This extinct species is extremely interesting because there's so little known about it. Most of the time when a new species is discovered, there's a series of fossils that can be traced back to the same specimen. Sometimes there's even stone tools and evidence as to what their social system looked like. But with this guy, there's none of that. We don't have any info of this old school dude because the only thing that we found was just one skull. It was discovered back in 1994, and since then there has been no discoveries that could be linked back to this guy. It's a lone ranger. Now, how could a skull be found and there be nothing else? Well, there's a good chance that this bad boy was killed by something, and then the skull was taken to another place and then just chucked on the ground after whatever was carrying it was done with it. It's kind of brutal, but back then skulls would have been ripped off of bodies all the time. It was the Stone Age, baby. People ripped your head off as a prank. Coming in at number 7, we have homosapien ildaltu. This might be one of our closest known ancestors that has died off. This dude was walking around 160,000 years ago, and in terms of life on this planet, that's not that long ago. They would have walked upright, and it seemed that most of them lived in northern Africa. The remains of this ancestor were found in Ethiopia. It's unknown why this species wasn't able to make it into the future with us. One of the fossils discovered had the best preserved skull of any extinct human species, so we have been able to learn a lot about the size of this people's brain and their eating habits. The brain was pretty close to the same size as our own, and it seemed like most of our ancestors, it fed primarily on a vegetarian diet. Coming in at number 6, we have Kennewick Man. What makes the discovery of Kennewick Man so interesting is that he's not that old. Now, this means that he is most likely a direct descendant and not an extinct species, but I wanted to include him on the list because I thought it was super cool. Kennewick Man was found off the coast of the Kennewick River in Colombia and holds a lot of similarities to other Native American people. He has similar bone structure, and it's thought that he could have very similar DNA as well. When he was found, some information about his death was very fascinating. He didn't die from a tiger attack or old age. He had a spear lodged in his hip. That's a good way to die. So that means competing tribes in the area were duking it out over rule of land way back then, before we were even drawing lines about which nations belong to which people. It really makes you think about how long we've been fighting for and how in some ways it's built into our DNA. Coming in at number 5 are Australopithecus ramidus. These guys play a very important role in understanding where we come from. Better known as Artie, these are some of the oldest known fossils that can be related to humans. This dude was most likely still covered head to toe in hair like a chimp. Now we would think that is super gross, but back then it was quite stylish. You were warm and comfy all the time. It was like having a free snuggie. They walked the earth about 4.5 million years ago in northern Africa. It's thought that the largest grouping of them would be in present-day Ethiopia. Now, why is Artie so important to knowing more about our genome? Well, because Artie was around at a pivotal moment in our development. 4.5 million years ago was when we were going through a transfer period, when we were going from walking around like an ape to sometimes on 2 legs. The question is, why did we change? Coming in at number 4 with Paranthropus boyacei. Now let's get a little closer to the modern age. Not that close though. This long lost ancestor was around 1.4 million years ago and was found throughout northern Africa. It's thought that they could have been one of the most dominant versions of humanoid for nearly 1 million years. That's not that bad of a track record. Hopefully we can pull off something similar. Something quite interesting about this ancestor is the mouth, jaw, and teeth, because they were freaking huge compared to a lot of other primates of that time. It's thought that they had a high-fat diet that consisted of nuts and hard shells. That is how they got the nickname nutcracker. This species would use its strong jaws to crack open nut cases that other creatures couldn't get to. Being able to get to high-calorie foods might be why this ancestor was able to be so dominant for so long. Coming in at number 3, we have Sahelanthropus chidensis. Now we are going back in time. This species is a common ancestor for both chimpanzees and humans. It's estimated that this beast walked the earth about 7 million years ago, and it was at this point where our 2 species split. It would have been 2 separate groups of primates breaking off that made our 2 separate species. I think we got the better deal out of this split. Now, why did our species do so much better than chimpanzees? Well, it could have been nutrition or crossbreeding with other ancient species, but the story is still yet to be told. Coming at number 2 is Australopithecus Australopithecus garhi. Alright, we're nearly at number 1, and this guy has locked down the number 2 spot because A. garhi was the first known pre-Homo species to use stone tools. That's absolutely incredible. It's thought that they were not primarily used for hunting or combat, but mostly for butchering meat that had already been killed. They most likely walked the earth 2.5 million years ago. They had huge jaws and heads, but brains that weren't much larger than any other Australopithecus that could have existed around that time. It seems that the females of these species were quite large, which could mean that the males and females were the same size. Coming in at number 1 is Australopithecus afarensis. Probably one of the best studied ancestors. The key to unlocking more knowledge about these dead species is fossils, and A. afarensis is one of the species that we have the most fossils of. Through modern discoveries, we have been able to determine that these males were much larger than the females, and there was most likely a constant battle for dominance between males. They competed for land and mates. The females most likely gathered foods for their prehistoric tribes. It's fascinating what we have been able to discover, and when I say we, I mean people much smarter than me who can pronounce big science words. I'm just the messenger who read a few things on the internet. Alright everyone, that has been our list, and as promised, I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts. Remember, if you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. I pick new pets every day, so if you don't get picked one day, you can message back another day. If it takes me a little while to get back to you, I am very sorry. I have a lot of these to do. Without taking any longer, let's shout out some pets. First up, we have Thomas, who is refusing to let you do any work because it is clearly time for some cuddles. Then we have Coco, who wants to give you some love but simultaneously doesn't want to move at all. Then we have Charlie, who has 2 different colored eyes, which is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Then we have the extremely cute kittens Griselda and Benny, who are just playing around. And to close it out, we have this amazing collage of this dog who is clearly busy. They have so much to do.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Neanderthals. Turns out that humans used to get it on with Neanderthals. Back in the 90s, as researchers were studying the Neanderthal genome, they discovered something pretty odd. Specific genes of the Neanderthal look similar to human genes. They figured out that this is because humans and the Neanderthals were getting freaky together back then. In particular, men were getting it on with female Neanderthals. However, they believed that it was pretty rare for this to happen, and it only happened sporadically. The mystery that remains is why. Was it to satisfy their impulses, or at one point were they capable of loving each other? In our 9th spot, we have Newgrange. This is a prehistoric site built around 3100 BC. In fact, it is said to be the oldest and most famous prehistoric site in all of Ireland. Basically, it's this really weird round structure made out of wood, clay, and stone. The roof is covered in grass, and inside the structure is a long passage that leads to a cross-shaped chamber. A lot of detail went into this place. It's completely waterproof, and still to this day, and the entrance of the tomb was positioned in a way so that during the winter solstice, the sun would beat in through the opening and down the passage to light it up. Clever, right? Well, we still don't know who this was built for and why. Whoever it was, they had to have been pretty significant. Moving on at number 8, we have eating zebras. I mean, hey, I get it. Back then, you gotta eat whatever you got your hands on, including zebras. This was one of the more common animals that the early humans would hunt and kill. Now, how do we know for a fact that they ate zebras? Good question, my friend. Well, researchers found stone tool marks on zebra bones. The marks looked like they were made when the animal was being butchered up. So 2.6 million years ago, the early humans lived on a diet of zebras. In our 7th spot, we have Göbekli Tepe. Constructed over 11,000 years ago, this landmark located in southeastern Turkey was originally just thought to be the remains of an old cemetery. However, upon excavating the land, they discovered more than 200 pillars in about 20 circles. The pillars are around 20 feet tall and weigh up to 10 tons. Some of the pillars have animal shapes carved into them. And the site isn't even fully excavated yet. It's theorized that that could take another 50 years. That's how big it is. Now here's the main mystery. This monument was built during a time when metal tools and pottery had not been developed yet. So how was this built, why was it built, and what was it for? In our 6th spot, we have the domesticated dogs.
The story of how we got dogs as pets is actually quite a weird one. Turns out we domesticated them by complete accident, or so that's what scientists claim. Basically, during the last ice age, ancient humans would give their meat scraps to dogs. This created a bond between the dogs and humans, as well as a sense of trust. They weren't all like, oh look how cute, I just want one by my side 24/7. No, they were like, here my dude, just eat my scraps. Oh, we're friends now? Cool. Now you may be like, why the hell would they share their food? They would have competed against each other. Well, humans can't only eat meat, so if they had some left over, they would share it. Eventually dogs realized that being by humans meant food, and that's how it all began. I'm just glad that it did because I'm a huge dog lover. Smash that like button if you are too. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Sacsayhuaman. It's the best I can say it. Located in Peru, the Sacsayhuaman is a series of strange stone walls made from 200-ton blocks of rock and limestone. Scientists originally believed that this structure was some sort of fortress, but now it's thought that it was used more symbolically. In fact, if you look at it from above, the walls seem to form the shape of a cougar head. Not only that, but close to the structure they actually found a bunch of underground catacombs and passageways. Is this somehow linked to this structure, or is it just a coincidence? Now, it was initially thought to be a fortress, but later on scientists were like, nah, no way. So the mystery is, why did they build this and for what purpose? Another mystery is how it was built. The stones fit together perfectly. In fact, not even a sheet of paper can fit in between the gaps. How did they do this, and how did they also transport those stones? Moving on at number 4, we have the pyramids. So let's take a trip back to ancient Egypt for a second. Back then, the pharaohs ordered pyramids to be built as tombs for them when they passed away. It took thousands of men and years to build these pyramids. Apparently, it took 100,000 men and 20 years to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. Pretty insane, right? So we know that the Egyptians were one of the first civilizations to believe in the afterlife. So I guess they went all out to ensure that they got there. It's still pretty incredible to think about all the time and effort that went into building the pyramid, and then they only used it for the dead. On top of that, how did they decide what shape to make them, and why were they so big and intricate? Surely we have theories, but there's no way to 100% know the reasoning behind it. In our 3rd spot, we have the Carnac stones. Over in Carnac, France, there are thousands of standing stones that were placed there during the Neolithic period, about 12,000 years ago. There are 4 groups of these stones. They are then arranged in rows that spread over 4 kilometers. The taller stones are to the west, and they get shorter as you follow them east. The big mystery is, what the heck are these for? Why did the people back then create this structure? To this day, archaeologists don't know the significance behind these stones. Some say that they were burial site markers, kind of like a modern day headstone. Or maybe it was a place for religious gathering. Or they were astronomical markers. We still don't know for sure though. Coming in at number 2, we have Teotihuacan. This was one of the world's largest cities back in 600 AD. It was believed to have held around 200,000 citizens. Here's the thing though. To this day, no one knows who built the city or what happened to its citizens. But after their disappearance, the Aztecs lived among the ruins of the city. They were oblivious to the city's original architects, but they did worship them. Like I said, this city is very mysterious. There were no royal tombs or artworks pointing at who their leaders were. So, that's weird. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Roman dodecahedrons. This is a very mysterious ancient artifact that we don't know why it was built or what it was used for. There are actually 100 of these weird objects that were found. They are typically made of either stone or bronze. They have 12 sides with a small circle on each and pegs sticking out from the connecting corners. Some say maybe it was a candle holder, but that seems pretty intricate and elaborate just to hold a candle. Whereas others think it served as a religious or astrological item. But much like a bunch of the other stuff on this list, we don't know for sure, so it remains a big mystery.